Pleasure to be able to host this along with this wonderful panel that we have managed to get in, especially at short notice, especially since all of us have been so occupied with COVID in India as we speak. But just wanting to share that this panel is being held in the backdrop of something India is the worst thing India is facing for more than 100 years. We have seen in the backdrop of this health crisis that an average monthly income of workers in the informal economy has fallen by 17%. We have seen millions of migrants walking home in the first lockdown. The second wave has taken us completely by surprise. And in the first wave, we lost 100 million jobs. Statistics show that post-lockdown, 61% of men remained employed. About 7% lost their jobs. But in the case of women, 47% suffered permanent job losses and only 19% remained employed. Now we have about approximately 230 million people falling below national minimum wage threshold. As of October 2020, statistics show that 77% increase in the number of people living below national threshold of income is what is going to be an outcome of the pandemic in India. I have on purpose started on this somber note only to share that I think there is a lot of hope. Out of every such challenge, it's all of us who come together with so much energy, so much commitment, so much of spirit that we will bounce back. And I think this panel today is going to be all about how we put our brains together and how the big question to this forum is, and what we are trying to address is, how can the process of large brands, is being very specific because I don't think the time is now left for very general talk. So this is a very, very focused panel on how can the process of large brands collaborating with producer-centric social enterprises for inclusive growth and prosperity be accelerated with innovative finance mechanisms. And here clearly the data points that there is a very strong gender angle to this, right? Because I think a lot of our work already embraces that, and that is something that will emerge. And obviously we have phenomenal panelists who are going to talk about it. I'll just take a minute to share about the origin of this panel, right? So I'm Neelam Chhiber. I'm the co-founder of Industree Foundation. We have worked with rural artisans for the last 25, 30 years. We build ecosystems for them. It's been a very, very long and organic journey, and we have realized that scale is the only way forward. And in this journey over the last few years, we have had an excellent partnership with IKEA, which is on this panel, with Deval of Dasra, who's on the panel, and also to some extent with Rebecca through FounderNEST, which is doing some stellar work in the sector. This panel it emerged as a thought. I've played a very, I would say, not a central, but a long role in Catalyst 2030. And I've learned a lot from my peers, from the Schwab, Ashoka, Skoll ecosystem. What I have learned is that it's very important that if we align our work around the SDGs, we then have not a short-term solution, but we always have a long-term solution that we could work towards, right? And therefore, Industree Foundation is really, really focused on trying to rename our sector, trying to rename the forces that we work with, all the artisans that we work with, all the small producers, vulnerable populations, the communities that we primarily work with. We're trying to call it the creative manufacturing sector, so that for once it gets highlighted, people start looking at it as a very strong potential to feed into global supply chains. And therefore, Kate Mohan of Target Foundation, we were in conversation with her. She said, Neelam, you, Nest, Dasra, all of you should come together and do some thought leadership sessions around this. And obviously, the first global partnership that we have, which is IKEA, is on the table with us as we speak. I would now like to quickly introduce Rebecca, who will be our first speaker. I think Rebecca has done some stellar work at Nest, still continuing to do. She has reached out immediately to us and all our people at Creative Dignity to see how she can support whatever is happening in India. She will be followed by Ann-Sofie of IKEA, who is the spokesperson for the IKEA Social Entrepreneurship Program. And she will speak about the fantastic work IKEA is doing and has been doing for the last 8 years in this sector. And then lastly, Deval will come in. So we've got the producer side represented by Rebecca. We've got the customer side represented by Ann-Sofie and IKEA. And then we have Deval. Deval is a real role model for me and many of us. His indomitable spirit. He's up at 5 a.m. these days with his real, genuine heart, really working relentlessly to really get all the support all of us social entrepreneurs need. We've all been through his Dasra social leadership program. Industree Foundation has had at least 8 people transitioning through their program. So he's really very much a part of the enabling ecosystem that is very needed for our sector. So Rebecca, quickly over to you. I'm sorry for the long introduction, but please.
My name is Rebecca Van Bergen, and I'm the founder of an organization called Nest. We've been operating for 15 years, working to advance the global handwork sector. We have an open access network for artisan businesses to join and provide free business training resources to anyone within the network, and then have several more in-depth programs. But we work at sort of the cross section of direct service with artisan producers and then brands and retailers. And one of the programs we've been most focused on over the last decade has been building a set of production standards for work that happens in homes or informal workshops within the artisan sector. So work that happens outside of the regulated factory. And I think it's been a really amazing journey for us, because not only is artisan and craft work happen in homes and informal workshops, but lots of other forms of more rote labor, whether you're sewing soles on shoes or putting items into poly bags, a lot of that gets subcontracted from a factory into a home. And as part of the informal economy, they have far less protections or visibility, which Neelam, mentioned in your remarks, the falling rates of employment and earnings for the informal sector, which were already kind of meager to begin with, I think is really alarming. And I think this past year has been devastating for a lot of micro and small business, and certainly for vulnerable workers. But I also think, we used to talk extensively about the resilience and importance of home-based labor as an organization, and really encourage companies to overturn kind of antiquated no home worker policies where they would only work with factory workers. And I think that while that was an important mission before, it's now a global imperative. People are home workers. I'm a home worker. We're all home workers. And now it's absolutely imperative that corporations who are rolling out remote work policies for their corporate employees are taking those policies downstream all the way through their production line and allowing for home-based labor to occur. And so we feel like this year will be a turning point in terms of formalizing informal work and the gender inequities that have long existed in supply chains. And so we're super passionate about what's to come, and really hopeful that the empathy that we all have now for home-based labor and the role of working women and working mothers will be extrapolated from kind of our own lives into those at the far reaches of supply chains.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. I'd also just, okay, I'll do my questions later, but there's so much more I'd love to hear about your work. But I'll move over to Ann-Sofie, and Ann-Sofie, would be so lovely to hear from you. Yeah.
Yes, hello everyone. Nice to be here, and I'm Ann-Sofie. I work at IKEA, integrations partners in our value chain, and I've been working with this now for 9 years actually, so almost since we started and I followed Industree and our other social business partners, as Rangsutra, Jordan River Foundation, etc., that we have been working with for several years. And we started with our first collection, actually launched our first collection from our social business partners in 2013. And I think we were quite in the forefront of really integrating social businesses, because we actually call Neelam is a social entrepreneur, but they are running a social business. And I think it's important because it is really business that we are doing with social impact. And I think that we at IKEA, we was really in the forefront of integrating social businesses in our supply chain and actually providing the social businesses with a marketplace and really having a tight collaboration when it came to, or when it comes to, because we still work like that, when it comes to design, how to really utilize and embrace the skills and capabilities that our social business partners have. And also with that we can sort of contribute with our knowledge in global supply chain and in how to scale and in how to increase productivity and efficiency. And we see this as a win-win situation. We can sort of offer our customers with something unique, because the majority of our partners so far are handicraft within the handicraft sector, and we can really offer our customers unique handicraft with a fantastic story behind. And the social business partners, the win-win for them is, of course, that they have a stable partner through IKEA, a marketplace where the products are sold, and also a collaboration partner when it's come to develop the company. And when we started, we had 3 partners, Rangsutra and Industree, among Doi Tung was there. And now we have around 9 partners. We started with around, I think in total, when we just started, was around 100 people involved. Now we have almost 5,000 people in the handicraft or in the home furnishing accessory sector that we're working with, and 28,000 people connected to social businesses in the food value chain, providing raw material, but also the production of the products. And what is important for us is that we aim for sustainable jobs rather than counting the numbers. It's quite easy for a company like IKEA to say that, oh yes, we have created 200,000 jobs. We are after sustainable jobs. We are after to have a sustainable collaboration throughout the years with the social business partners, because that's sort of how we can also create a sustainable change. That continuously for these people that for different reasons stands far away from the labor market or a paid job, is really to have a consistency. And it's also very important for the social business partners to have a consistency, because volume and consistency means that the social business partners can be more efficient and can set up an organization that also can be more efficient and decrease cost. And also it's very important for us that our social business partners, I mean, ideally, their turnover should increase higher or higher than the number of jobs, because then they are becoming more and more efficient. And that's how, because we need to really think that social business partners needs to be competitive, and that's how they can increase their social impact. And when it comes to when you talked about, Neelam, about gender equality, and we have a focus on women to contribute to jobs for women from vulnerable backgrounds or vulnerable communities, women that for different reasons have difficulties to get a decent job or difficulties to be integrated in the labor market. And especially in some areas, I mean, we really focus on the social challenges depending on where we are. In India, we are really focusing on women and women economic empowerment. And this is also one of the selection criteria when we are shortlisting and selecting new social business partners, that we really look into that how are our partners actively recruiting, retaining and development female co-workers, but also female managers. So it's a very important topic for us to work on. When it comes to trends, a trend that I see today, but that I would like to see more of, is actually how social businesses, social entrepreneurs can work in network to build capacity and efficient production, and through that cutting the cost and to work smart. Because big corporates like IKEA, we want to establish, and I think it's not only us, also other corporates want to establish collaboration with social businesses that are at a certain maturity level, that are scalable and fairly competitive. And with bigger volumes, cost will decrease, competitiveness will increase, and number of jobs will increase. I also see a trend of bringing social entrepreneurship, or rather social entrepreneurship, into the regular supply chain. And what I mean by regular supply chain in the context of IKEA means our regular suppliers that are not social business partners. They are regular businesses, and they are creating social impact, of course, as well. But what we are targeting in the social entrepreneurship initiatives is to reach out to marginalized groups. And in the example of IKEA, this social entrepreneurship means that we will sort of create and contribute to social impact for marginalized groups through collaborations with social business regular supply chain. Because if we can work through our regular supply chain and make them more socially aware, we will have the possibility to create huge social impact for the future. So that's what I think with inclusive business will be. And I think that social businesses will be in the forefront of actually be the guiding star, that how can we work through business.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann-Sofie. And I think thanks so much for all that and sharing in such depth, because frankly, I would say that the work that IKEA has initiated 9 years ago is truly, truly landmark, right? And obviously we really look at, and I think a lot of other brands are also slowly looking at that. It's also a very good segue into bringing Deval into the conversation, right? Because it's quite clear that when we talk about some scale, Deval, and we talk about creating more jobs and impacting more lives, there is an investment required to take these small community, and we know that 99% of the NGOs in the world are small NGOs. The entire funding mechanism doesn't encourage the formation of unicorn NGOs, right? And in any case, that's how you get your feet on the ground. You get the right messaging from the ground. There's more agency in the communities. How then are we going to bridge this gap that Ann-Sofie has spoken about? Because that the larger brands who have the power of buying in quantity, and quantity is important, it creates efficiency, it does, right? And it's not necessarily always a bad thing. And quantity is also, meaning it's not talking about lakhs and lakhs of pieces, but it could be 50,000 pieces, right? But there is a certain investment required into the communities, which is not going to give you immediate returns, right? How are we going to bridge that financing gap? And please, Deval, you talk about yourself, talk about Dasra, give the entire background, and then let's address what is happening and what your thoughts on the financing gaps are. Yeah.
No, thank you, Neelam. And I think to your point, I think we all forget on how much sort of friends and family and networks had played a big role in getting any of these industries up and running. And unfortunately, the communities that most of groups like Industree deals with do not have access to any of those things. They have a significant amount of social capital in the communities that they serve, but when it comes to design inputs, when it comes to financing, when it comes to access to markets, these things just don't exist. And I think one of the things that I guess we've been very, very fortunate with as Dasra, and we see Lisa Kleissner on the call, is about 15 years ago, they came together with a private equity investor and a Goldman Sachs banker and said, let's fund the capacity building of organizations. Organizations that are on the ground, that are working with local communities, that are there again with just not just a great heart, but also a mind towards sustainability. And their viewpoint, and I still remember the founding of the social impact program, was that the world had too many business plan competitions where we're just sort of rating those who had access to good business schools and giving them these awards. And 1 out of 50 sort of gets, that prize, versus how do we help all 50 not just get a prize, but more importantly, build a sustainable institution and organization. And so I think to begin with, just creating that value proposition to all investors on the need to sort of, create sort of these early stage investments on business training, on skills, on creating networks. This is something that's so imperative. And I think, there was a time when microfinance, 30 years actually, that required grant funding. Impact investing as well. Acumen Fund came in, and they were probably one of the larger well-known players, and they actually did not have a goal of returning capital back. It was replenishing that capital. And the only reason I bring it up is it's this patient capital that we've also seen, as we know, with groups like the unicorns that you mentioned, Neelam, that for 20 years have made zero money. But that patient capital is still there. And so I think what the sad thing about it is, for-profit investors give far greater leverage and leniency to for-profit institutions versus those that have a social mission and are trying to aim for sustainability. And so I do think that there's clearly a far greater multiplier effect if we can invest in these sort of ecosystem projects. And again, NEST does a fantastic job at supporting entrepreneurs around the world, and many times just giving them a network that they can then rely upon when things like this that are happening. And so today in India, there's not an organization that we know that doesn't have 30 to 50% of their staff infected by COVID. I mean, this week alone, we've had 3 colleagues and board members, mothers, pass away. And these are people who have access to healthcare, but still, literally, we made 500 phone calls 2 weeks ago in Delhi and couldn't even get a hospital bed for one of our colleagues' close relatives. And the reason I bring this all up is because I think, unfortunately, at times, grant makers are equally to blame. We start chasing sort of these artificial targets that we put on ourselves or the organizations we support, which is, making people run much faster than they have to, and don't actually focus on how do you build that sustainable ecosystem around that entrepreneur, and more importantly, around the community, so they can then withstand, all of these sort of hurdles that we see in front of them. And I think, at least with the lockdown, when that happened in India, and it continues to happen today, unfortunately, while many of us are able to sit on the phone and talk like this, and our lives haven't necessarily been too damaged, the most of the communities, at least 1 billion people in India, their lives every year, every day has been like a COVID. They don't have access to water, they don't have access to electricity. And so I think while we've been shaken, I think it's really important when anyone is funding, for-profit or nonprofit, I think it's really important to understand that we need to actually look at the entire sort of ecosystem that you're supporting, and really focus on that ecosystem, strengthening that first, and then looking at profits and sustainability. And older companies in the US, or even in India for that matter, like the Tatas and others, their first goal was actually to develop the community, create schools and hospitals and infrastructure, and then look at employment. For whatever reason, we're looking at it all wrong. And I guess we're seeing the ramifications of that clearly with, lack of healthcare systems across the world. And so I do think it's about time that we as funders start asking ourselves the difficult questions and realize perhaps we're as much part of the problem as the solution. And I think you have to really have that in mind and think about pure sustainability versus just, the profits that you may make in any good year.
Thank you, Deval. Thank you. Yeah, and it's fantastic having Lisa here. I just saw Charlie pop in from the back to have a look at your beard, Deval, I'm sure. Right. Okay. So Rebecca, I'm coming over to you. Rebecca, NEST has done some phenomenal work. You have great reach across so many countries and across so many skills, right? And I just want to hear from you, what are the typical challenges? What are the kinds of things you think and the kinds of funding needs that could be required to really look at getting a lot of your groups to a situation that Ann-Sofie spoke about?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm going to echo so much of what Deval said. I agree with so much of it. And I think that one of the challenges that we all kind of collectively face is the misperceptions around the artisan sector. I think that, for 15 years, we've been, screaming in the wind with you, Neelam, I know by my side, and about the importance of the sector, especially for women. And for whatever reason, philanthropy has long ignored this sector. We did just because we were curious as a team, we downloaded it in the United States. If you're a philanthropic foundation, you're required to report where you're spending your funding on a form called a 990, and they're open access. Anyone can see them. It's law. And so we downloaded the 990s, those forms, for the top 50 funders in the US, and only 0.02% went to the artisan sector. This is a sector that by most estimates is 300 million individuals. I mean, it's clearly a major economic driver for women, and 0.02% went to this sector. I mean, I can talk about it all day long, but the gender imbalance is real. And I think that for so many people, they see artisan work as niche or non-scalable. They see it as like a small cooperative of women doing side work. And so part of our goal at NEST has been to both maintain direct investment in artisan producers to help them scale, but also show the sheer global size of the sector and how, that and help make people understand that it's a massive economic opportunity, that the informal role that women play in our economy is significant and needs to be viewed that way. And so I think it's really important. And I think that we need to all collectively work towards recruiting more funders into this sector, because I think what's needed, and is that most of the businesses aren't impact investment ready. Most of them need an infusion of philanthropy, of not just patient capital, but just capital to get them to the place of true business development. And I believe in, I'm happy to debate it, but that should be philanthropy, that they're not at the point of growing a business and just adding more employment. They need to have the foundation of a business, and that is rooted in social need. They need to overcome many social hurdles within their own communities, lack of access, a whole host of other things that we should view as a philanthropic investment to prepare them for impact investment and scale. And so to me, it should be a ladder, and we're trying to come in midway without doing all this, without helping them climb to the point where they would be ready for that type of capital. And so, which is why I'm fierce about the resources we provide artisan businesses always being free of cost. We'll raise philanthropy, and I'm happy to do it. But I think that we need to, take several steps backwards and believe in our social entrepreneurs, our artisan entrepreneurs, by investing in them without expecting a return, to get them to a place where their business is strong enough to take impact investment capital. You're on mute.
Extremely well said, Rebecca. I finally found somebody who speaks more passionately about the sector than I do. So that's truly
I don't know about that. I think we tie.
Yeah, but yeah, and actually, because of the horror of the situation in India, that it's India's second largest rural income provider, and it's still considered not to be significant, is why at least I am taking the drastic step of renaming it the creative manufacturing sector. Just saying, okay, just call it manufacturing, just call it creative, call it something. But artisanal, handicraft, handloom, somehow that's just not working. It just hasn't worked for so long.
And how sad is that we have to spend our time renaming a sector? I mean, we do that too. We call it handwork because we want to avoid people being like, we don't fund artisans. But that you and I are wasting our time coming up with a new terminology speaks to the problem, I think, pretty well.
Totally. There is this new wonderful book written by someone in Northern Europe, where they're really talking about the growth of cultural economies, right? So all of us are desperately looking where we fit, how we fit, get the logic through to people. But I think IKEA really bang on grasped this trend 9 years ago. And a lot of the collections are called handwork. And because handwork is apparently going to be a very, very, very major trend globally, right? There's, I mean, even Germany now has a vertical for handwork, right? Because it's being noticed, and I think COVID, etc., will accentuate it more and more and more, that there is going to be so much of work from home, and society is going to get so dismally fragmented. There are going to be so many mental health issues, and actually working with your hands is such a very basic form of keeping sort of sane, which is why a lot of us cook, obviously, because that's the only way, and which is why this whole cooking frenzy, these cooking shows, because you're doing something with your hand. But then unfortunately for us, it's a luxury, but there are millions and millions of people out there for whom it's a necessity. So Ann-Sofie, I'm just coming across to you now, and I think it's more of a comment. It's not really a question, because like I said, I will at some point run out of questions, but it's a comment in the sense that, and it's just come to my mind, because I think it's a very interesting thing we took a decision on when we started working with IKEA. What was more important to us? Was it the markets provided by IKEA? Or was it the fact that we could not, I mean, so it's very clear to us that if IKEA provides us a market because we work with IKEA Commercial, then by European law, IKEA Foundation cannot support us because we are part of the IKEA value chain and European law doesn't allow it, right? And to me, this is just a comment that markets are so important that we always decided that at IKEA, the market was more critical to us than any support from IKEA Foundation, right? And therefore, when we go out there, when we go to other philanthropic donors and ask for support to build these value chains that can supply and have access to regular incomes and work from organizations like yours, Ann-Sofie, because it's not just the markets, Ann-Sofie. You guys have provided us, you see, now I finally understood what technical assistance means. I mean, for years, people spoke about technical assistance, but actually an organization can never grow on its own. You always have to grow hand in hand. It's like a child. So, you know, all children can just grow by themselves, no? But they've got someone holding their hand through the steps. And I think that's been the 9-year journey, which again, no one has encapsulated in terms of its cost. That you held our hands, Rangasutra's hands, and the other 8-9 organizations who work with you, right? So like I said, it's a comment, I'm speaking for you. But if there's anything you want to share here, please do so. Yeah.
No, I think I think you bring something that is very important. It has been a collaboration, as you say, holding hands, and that we have scaled in a step-by-step approach that is sustainable for the social business partners that we have worked with. And I think in India, I think that both Industree and Rangsutra is a good example of and you have been working and scaling in a little bit different ways. You have different business models and you work in different areas. But I think the common thing is that both of you have been growing, and you are very professional organizations. You are very customer centric, and you are providing with global range for IKEA now since a few years back. And I think that's absolutely amazing. So and I wish that we hopefully now the coming years can see more examples of social business partners that can perhaps work collaboratively together, perhaps work in networks with organizations that can support with the management part. Because I think that's so crucial, because you are Industree and also Rangsutra, you are at a level now that you can employ people that actually can manage the company and have those skills and can do that. And you once said, Neelam, that it's easier to actually employ a business person that is sort of is slightly social than to employ a person that comes from the social perspective to be business oriented. And that is really, I don't say that one thing is more important than the other, but I think the business orientation and that knowledge needs to, social businesses, if they want to grow, needs to have that perspective. But but pros also networks and other organizations can contribute to that. So perhaps the social business doesn't need to have it themselves. And that's what I think that really could strengthen this more network working. You don't need to grow by your own. See it as a network and really add the competence. And there are so many people, young people, professionals that have this knowledge in design, in business, in online sales, etc., that want to work with social businesses. So I think there are so many people that can contribute.
Absolutely.
But it's needed, I think, if more social businesses wants to work with big corporates, because it's more or less impossible for companies like IKEA to work with incubators, at least if it shall be a business relationship and not be sort of CSR initiative.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. And you're right. I think the time has come, and I think that's one of the only, I think, plus points we all see in COVID, that we are all able to network faster. We're all able to collaborate faster. All our traditional guards and working in silos are dropping faster. And therefore, I think what you're saying is right. It always need not be about money. It can also be about how we all network together, learn from each other, and grow together, right? And Deval, I'm coming over to you again, and just wanting to call out that over the years, we've noticed that there has been, it's like Rebecca pointed out, right? I know you're on her side, so this is not about sides. But Rebecca pointed out that 0.02% goes to the sector. I also believe it's our failing. It's our failing because we have never ever, because I think a lot of people in our sector are extremely passionate and they love the sector. So it's really tough for them to have come together to make a very rational explanation and talk about how, and I love the way Rebecca has just shared the concrete numbers. They've gone in, they've researched 0.02%, but 300 million people, right? So how do you think our sector could be projecting itself to raise the amount of philanthropic and the amount of impact investment and blended finance it needs to scale? And the last thing before I open this to you is Lisa is here. Lisa told me long back, Neelam, you don't have to say you're raising philanthropic funding. She said you're raising grant equity, right? Because a lot of us raise equity for businesses, but now you're asking for a grant as an equity. So now we coined this word of grant equity. So Deval, just tell us, how do you think we could all be pitching better in the ecosystem and to get the kinds of funds we really need to build this enabling ecosystem?
I mean, I think, and Rebecca, I think said it best, we're all home workers right now. And I think, unfortunately, in the Indian context, with less than 2% of our population being vaccinated, this is going to continue for another few years. And there's nothing that we can do about it. And so again, Neelam, what Industree is thinking about in terms of shifting the way you were looking at production units even, and saying how much can be put in the home back to the home. How much can it be so families don't have to leave the house? I mean, why do they have to go to a place to work and none of us have to? And so I think it's really important to even start with the facts that are in front of us. And again, the whole world has seen how many people have had to live for many, many years, and just demonstrating that, look, to make this into a more home-based industry, these are the additional costs we have to bear. But without that, there is no manufacturing. I mean, we can't go to a factory and go when transportation doesn't exist. We can't go outside of our houses when there's lockdowns. We can't do so many things. And most of what you and all of these groups are doing are not web-based industries. These are proper things that you need machinery, you need to have distribution channels, et cetera. And so I do think it's really important, as you've been saying in the past, Neelam, that this is going to be a 5-year game. And we need to really think differently about the next 5 years. We need to say, what does it take to enable those 47% of women to come back into the labor force. I mean, no kids have been in school the last year in India, and I'm sure the same holds true in other places, but it's probably going to be in the next few years before kids are back into school again, which again puts further pressure on mothers for whatever reason than fathers. And so I do think we need to really just rethink about what are the needs of sustainable livelihoods, and it will just cost us more going forward. And the great thing I know that Industree has done more recently is the Flourish platform, right? Creating an e-commerce website that multiple artisans can actually display their wares and goods, and their owners of that e-commerce platform itself is fantastic. And I think that's really the new kind of capitalism that we all need to start imbibing, just because these inequalities, are just too far now. And I think it is thinking about that. And I guess from my perspective, at least, and this was, the very few years I was a banker before doing this, it's not about, like, no one questions whether it's debt or equity. Why do we question whether it's philanthropic or not? I mean, all of this is equity all of these are investments to have some return on society. Then whether I choose to get it back, whether I get an interest coupon, whether I get 3% ROI, it really doesn't matter. And I think we need to start breaking down the barriers, given, of course, the wealth creation that happens everywhere. I mean, the inequality in India is no different than what we see in America, right? Where you have people worth $200 billion and you have people worth $2. And so I do think we just need to talk about, social sort of impact and justice, and not worry about the kind of capital we're deploying, but more importantly, what effect and impact are we having on people's lives? And I think it's about time that becomes the conversation versus, all the other noise that we hear in all sectors, including the development sector.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Deval. I think now it's a great time to open out to the audience. Any comments from the audience? I see Sumita, who's a great co-partner with us with IKEA. I see Kate Mohan, who's actually inspired this session. Any comments, anything you'd like to share? Because also one of the key aims of this conversation was to talk about a call to action, frankly, which we'll come to as we go along. I have been noting points. I think we are quite a force to reckon with. We've got a network called Creative Dignity set up. We can look at creative dignity going global. So this is all about just giving a voice to the sector, right? And I'd just love to hear if anyone else from the audience would like to make a comment. Lisa, anyone, any questions? Just happy to hear. Yeah.
Neelam, I have a comment.
Hi, Kate. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you to Rebecca for her comments around the relationship between gender and the amount of funding available. I mean, I think certainly raised for me a broader question around where philanthropy is allocating resources across the sort of livelihood sector, and how much of those resources are being allocated towards livelihoods that traditionally where women have thrived and been employed. I think we're sort of seeing some increasing focus on women in farming and agriculture, but I think Rebecca's spot on in saying very little conversation about the artisan sector. The other comment I just wanted to make is about this question around capital, right? Because I think this is a really interesting question, especially when you're in a role where you are sort of managing one particular type and you're looking for opportunities to build pipelines where you're able to kind of hand off so that partners can grow. I mean, the reality is there's a regulatory framework too in which all of us work. Neelam, I thought you gave a great example about kind of the environment IKEA and IKEA Foundation work in. Target and Target Foundation also are obviously subject to some of the regulatory requirements in the US. And so I think it's, it's a really good point around sort of philosophically, where might we be thinking about these resources? But then we're also working in these very different regulatory frameworks in each of our countries.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Thanks. And thanks a lot. Kate Mohan, Target Foundation, who supports NEST, who supports us. We are working on Industree has 3 models of growth. So we have deep engagement, where we work in communities and build collectives that can supply to brands like IKEA. Then our second growth engine is Regen Earth. It's an accelerator, as Ann-Sofie shared, where we have people come together learning. Dasra has helped us build that accelerator, focused on creative manufacturing. And our third vertical is Light and Handholding, or the societal platform for inclusive entrepreneurship. And frankly, I really think we owe Kate a lot, because she understood all the three engines. And she said, we'll support you across the three engines. And it's a small sum of money, or it's a medium-sized sum of money, or it's a large sum of money, going by whoever's standards. But she spread it across all the three, because each feeds into the other. So I think that's another call out for the donor community, which is why I said, though the situation is depressing, there is hope, because every now and then we find all these high energy sparks and all the connections. And any other thoughts, comments from anyone in the audience? Would love to hear. Yeah.
This
Or
is
any
Lisa.
questions?
Yeah, Lisa, I just wanted to mention that I think one of the things we're seeing during COVID in particular is that the demand side has to take the lead in showing the supply side what they need to do. And I think that that's been missed out, because I see so many folks on the supply side creating programs to address COVID when they're not boots on the ground, and they don't understand what the issues are, nor do they understand the intricacies from enterprise to ecosystem and what needs to be addressed. So I just put a comment in the chat that it's something that not only do we see the need for, but we need to capacity build the demand side in order to build those engines, and then go to the supply side and show them where that fit is. And that is the work that Dasra is doing. That's the work that I do in my home state of Hawaii. That's the work we used to do together in India, but I'm doing it more remotely. And that's the work that you're doing, Neelam. You are working across that whole system and providing the glue as an intermediary to build and strengthen the layers of that ecosystem in order for that engine to thrive. So I just wanted to compliment you both on the comments you've made, and particularly, Deval, what you said about capital. That was amazing. I wish I had a recording of that. I want to use that.
So we have a recording. We'll send you the quote. Yeah, and so Lisa is my mentor, and she runs a wonderful program in Hawaii called Hawaii Investment Ready. And it's when I see the program, it's when I see the entrepreneurs in Hawaii, and I see the kind of emphasis that she and all the social entrepreneurs are talking about bringing back their culture. It's become so clear to me that this is going to be the future. People are going to want to go back to their culture, and we learn phenomenally from the Hawaii Investment Ready program. And I think even IKEA, when it builds its program, it realizes the visceral need customers have to engage with communities, right? I still remember Ann-Sofie coming, I think in the second year of the program. She came to Bangalore to our office, and she presented to us that, the amount of monetary return which they had tabulated that they got on the social media through the launch of Next Generation, right? And IKEA had very scientifically tabulated it in terms of if they had paid for all that, but they just got it, right? And so I think these are the kinds of companies which understand that they've got to look at the returns. And actually, this is a patient investment, right? So it's been a long journey, lots of ups and downs with the customer, with IKEA. But they also understand, and they know, they're not hiding, that they get all kinds of returns from it, right? Any other questions? Any other thoughts from anyone, please? Yeah. Yep, then I have something to say.
Hi, Neelam. This is Sumita here. Nice
Yes,
to
Sumita. Welcome.
all, and hello everyone else. Many known faces. Ann-Sofie, everyone, Jessica, and some faces which are hidden. Vanita. So I just joined about 10 minutes back, and maybe this has been said, but I'd just like to repeat what, you said, Neelam, is that, for us, and we are we are a community-owned enterprise. So we are a for-profit business. So we don't get grants actually. Although we do now have a foundation which has started working this last 3 years, but the kind of support that's needed for the craft enterprises in the smaller areas, in villages and district headquarters and blocks, in terms of building infrastructure, simple things like in many of the villages where we work, we cannot even find a room to rent where 20 women can come and sit and produce. Even they don't even need equipment. All they need is thread and needle and fabric. But still there's no place. So so that is something that I have been like going blue in the face, asking our the local MPs of wherever we work, the MLAs, district collectors, but somehow to build safe and safe and proper workspaces where women and men, but women can come especially and work in rural India. This is just not there. And in addition, of course, the infrastructure that's needed, whether it's sewing machines where women are sewing things, or looms where they are weaving. So this is something I think that all and many non-government donors say that, oh, we can't fund infrastructure, but then that's something that's needed. It's so needed for to create that level playing field. Otherwise, you have these women with amazing skills, but the situation around is not conducive for them to be efficient, to produce more so that they can earn more, to produce better quality work, because they have the opportunity to learn, to come to a place where they can learn and earn at the same time. So I just like to repeat that. Thanks.
Yes, Sumita, it's so wonderful having you here. You've been a wonderful co-partner with us, with IKEA, for the last 9 years. And so much success you have seen, and it's so wonderful. And I think so this is a good point for us actually to segue into a sort of a call for action. We're all part of Catalyst 2030 in some way or the other, right? And it's a very dynamic setup there. Jaru is a greatly committed lady. She's actually initiated something which is Amazon spelled backwards. She hasn't, a bunch of us have. So it's about building, I think Kate attended that session too. It was on Monday or Tuesday. So it's Amazon spelled backward, no Zama, right? But it's all about how we all take this crisis, take the opportunity, take the SDGs, learn from each other, learn to articulate properly, learn to get through to all kinds of donors, and we share with each other, and we kind of build out the ecosystem network. So all of us learn, grow, and we can escalate and show the worth of this sector with greater speeds. And so this panel was around B2B. It was around larger markets. And the panel on Tuesday was around B2C, right? Where we build an enabling environment at the back. So all these groups have a common backbone for technology and supply chain and registrations. We've just launched Flourish. It's a global e-commerce platform that's owned by the producers. We've gone blue in the face because it's got to be a global sales platform. And the laws of every country are different. I can't even imagine how we're going to do it in Ghana or Nigeria, doing it in India, we're doing it in the US. I cannot imagine how we'll do it in Latin America. But how do we all partner for common backends? And of course, share the stories, like IKEA stories with other brands. We know that IKEA has worked really hard. I mean, with H&M, for example, H&M launched something called We Care, right? Nest was involved, we were involved. But I think this influencing voice, because sometimes a lot of large brands, customers also are not that well equipped to deal with stuff the way IKEA has been. IKEA at board level has taken this decision that IKEA social entrepreneurs, it's its fourth pillar, right? But all these learnings and how can we create an enabling ecosystem? So we really want to continue with a series of thought leadership sessions and create a kind of a task force or a working group within Catalyst 2030. So just be happy. And so that's the call for action I'm putting out. So anybody interested, please do write in. We have an email ID out there. There needs to be an email ID out there for this. Mail me if there is nobody else's email ID. So I'm just putting neelam@industree.org.in or mail Indrani. Indrani, do type in. And so that's the whole idea. And that's a very concrete end to this session so that we all know that we are all committed and we stay committed to the cause. And how will we reach the next level? Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Ann-Sofie. Thank you, Deval. Thank you, Veerle of Catalyst 2030. I hope I've got a pronunciation right. And thank you all for all the participants and everyone who's come for this session. Thank you so much. Thank you. And look forward
Thank
to
you so much, Neelam, as well, and participants and all the panelists. It was a great session. I just wanted to do a quick little mention that we do have our closing ceremony happening in an hour today. We have a great lineup of speakers. I'll quickly send a little link in the chat if anyone wants to sign up for that. It's going to be great as well. And again, thank you for this wonderful session. It was super interesting. Great stuff.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Veerle, do you need any help from me?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.